about reliability, resilience, robustness. So also it is very important is that things that we design, things that we manufacture, things that we put in society, they should be very safe. And then we could say, what is safety? So that is the purpose. So sometimes we say that safety can be even higher than reliability. Because if things are not safe, then you can hurt the environment, you can hurt people, and that has a lot bigger social consequences than just because my pointer didn't work. If with this pointer I make somebody blind, that is very critical, versus if maybe my pointer didn't work. So sometimes we say that safety has to be first, and then of course reliability is important. So it is not a question of hierarchy. Primary thing is that in addition to being safe, first things have to work, right? But they have to work in a safe way, right? Just because something works, but it is hurting and harming people, that isn't very good. So typically I teach like 5-day course with like 40 hours on safety. So we'll summarize that course maybe in 50 minutes from 5 days about what is safety. So sometimes people say accidents happen, but the question is, why do accidents happen? Are they designed by God? Are they designed by people? What do you think? People? No.
Always no design by
Because of people. Most careless of the design products, right? Yeah. There is no God that puts a wire on the floor, right? And if I get injured and trip on the wire, I can't blame God for that, right? They happen because they are designed in the system. Okay, guys. Okay, I think we had enough discussion. Yeah, we had enough discussion. Now we can listen for 50 minutes. Is that okay? Thank you. Thank you. So let's learn something about safety. They, like in United States, especially in defense and in private companies, safety is very important because our society believes in liability. So the word liability means if you do something wrong, you are liable. And not even that you are liable, like with smoking, somebody says that there is a fine. You could be criminally negligent if you hurt or harm or injure a person. So there are all kinds of books and training program. Just like yesterday, some person came to give you a lecture about safety and driving. So safety is a very important part of reliability. And reliability and safety go together. And there are hundreds of documents, and these documents, they are available free to anybody in the world. You can Google Air Force Safety Management, and you can download 100-page book on how to engineer things that are safe and that are reliable. So there are many. And then there are many military standards about safety. So like MIL stands for Military Standard, say 882D. So it says, standard says, what is safety? It says freedom from those conditions that cause death, injury, occupational illness, damage or loss to equipment or property, as well as damage to the environment. So when we talk about safety, we not only talk about people or equipment, but anytime you pollute by driving or by burning or by firecrackers on Diwali, it is a safety problem, right? Because if you pollute the air, then some people cannot breathe. If they cannot breathe, some older people will die. And you have no right to kill people. At least you have a lot of freedom, but no one in this world has a is free to hurt and harm other people or hurt and harm the environment. So that's the key idea. Then we could say, how can you have safety in the whole organization? And then how can we develop systems and procedures and standards and guidelines so that everything in the organization is safe? So you see that a standardized management and engineering discipline that will integrate consideration of man or people, machine, environment in planning, designing, testing, operating, maintaining our organization. And I think in your educational material, if you're interested, you can read all the details about safety and how to incorporate safety in the university, in the organization, in your house, everywhere. Because safety, anytime something works, always remember is it will degrade or it could fail. And if it fails, then there can be injury, and there can be harm to environment, even death to people. So that's why it becomes very, very important. And you have to do it in the context of systems thinking. Systems means that you have to focus on holistic thinking. You cannot be selfish, right? Just think about yourself. You always have to think about the system. You always have to develop consciousness how you are affecting other people in society. Make sense? Another thing like we learned is that we tend to be very selfish. Selfish is not a good characteristic, right? Because you can be selfish up to a degree, but as soon as you start hurting, harming other people, you have philosophically no right as a human being to do that. Every religion will teach you that, right? Not only my engineering principles, but anyone will teach that you cannot just hurt and harm and kill other people. That is against any thinking, whether at a philosophical level or in a religious sense or in a faith sense. So then standards can talk about how do you apply engineering and management principles for safety. So there are key premises or key assumptions. So we say accidents don't just happen. They are not acts of God. Many times people say, oh, accident happened, as if it was not my fault or it was not fault of somebody else. So our assumption is if you say accidents just happen, then it means is that as a human being, I can do nothing about accidents. Right? So as soon as you resign yourself that you cannot do anything about accidents, then accidents will keep on happening. People will keep on dying on highways, right? So if like 50 years ago in America, United States, there were like 60,000 deaths every year on highway. Today it is 30,000. So 60,000, we couldn't just say they just happen. People just die. But we understood why these people are dying, how to change the design of the car. You come up with the seat belt, you come up with the airbag. Today, our cars are so smart. As soon as I come near somebody, my car brakes itself and doesn't want to hit anybody. It will automatically stop. Even if I want to kill somebody, I can't kill. Because car will say, no, I won't do it for you. I will just stop right here. So the idea is you cannot resign and say they are acts of God. We as engineers and then political, social things, cultural habits in the society, of course will impact safety. So that means when you talk about safety, you have to talk about a lot of things in addition to engineering, in addition to management, that how you create a safety culture in this society. And only way you can create safety culture is, of course, if you're no longer selfish. If you're selfish, your selfishness would hurt, harm, injure many people in the society. So he says that accidents are results of hazards. So this is consistent with our scientific approach of cause and effect. So hazards are the causes that will be actualized to become accidents. So then as a designer, I have to design it to get rid of lot of hazards, right? So anytime you design something, we can do safety analysis, and then we can figure out how many millions of hazards are there, right? And then step by step by step, redesign and eliminate the hazards. So whether you're talking of food, health, in hospitals, in engineering system, on the road, in a power plant, whether it's nuclear or regular power plant, in a factory, how many people die in factories because of accidents? They just don't die. It is because factory did not have good systems and procedures to prevent accidents from happening. We didn't train people and so on. So we typically say that many hazards are man-made. You could say some hazards are environmental and we have no control over that. Like certainly you could have tremendous flooding or there's an earthquake and on and on. But most of the hazards are man-made. That means we designed them in the system. So he says that inherent latent system design flaws are there. And then we say that if they are man-made, then we can recognize the hazards. So then the training of a safety engineer, reliability engineer, when you design something, you cannot design something unless you understand safety, right? No engineer has the power to kill people, right? So all the equipment, things that you design, they have to be safe. Of course, technology is important, but we don't want to develop technology that will kill and hurt people and that will harm the environment. So you really have to, you can recognize them. And if we say that the system responses are predictable when you understand it. Of course, if you don't understand it, you could say it is act of God. Not that it is really act of God. All it means is that you're not smart enough to understand it, right? So if I understand it, then no longer it is act of God, right? But whatever you don't understand, old thinking is anytime you debate with a person, they will ask questions. Today we are not smart enough to answer your question. Then as soon as you say, I'm not smart enough to answer your question, they say, see, this is God, because you cannot tell me why something like that is happening. So anything that is not understood, that you cannot answer today based on science, we can lump it in a bigger umbrella of faith. I say I take these things based on what I believe in, and then you no longer question that. Because I'm not supposed to challenge your faith, right? Because that is your right to have. But you don't have a right on your faith to hurt other people. To hurt other people. So you say that system responses is predictable. Hazards analysis, that is one of the approach that we teach in safety management. It can identify the hazards. So then we teach many methods how to do hazard analysis, and then there are many tools that people teach, and people write PhD theses like fault tree analysis and how to do, how things can fail and can kill people, and then diagnostics and how to, anytime you do diagnostic, that means you have cause, effect, right? Your car doesn't start, then there's a manual. It says car isn't starting, maybe the battery is dead, maybe the fuel isn't there. So you can make a logical tree why something is not working. So once you have a logical tree, then you can automate it, you can computerize it, then your computers can get you all kinds of diagnostics. So like today in a fancy car, there are hundreds of diagnostics. It will tell you what your tire pressure is, oil pressure is, everything, and then it will tell you which part you should replace, right? So all of that is based on methods that we teach. So the objective is to understand the root cause and then quantify the risk associated with root causes. And if we control the hazards, then long-term chain means we can control the accidents, right? Make sense? So like today in India and a lot of places in the world, so many people die because people use cell phones. How many people in India die because the driver is on a cell phone when they are driving? You guys do that? Yes, no? That's very wrong, right? Because just because you want to answer a message or talk to your friend, you have no right to kill another human being because it is so important to you to answer a call from your mom or dad or a friend, right? Makes sense? I don't know whether there is a statistics in India how many accidents are because of cell phones. You know, there may be some statistics. Yes, no? No? No. Problem with the society here is that lot of data is not collected and lot of data is hidden. Like old days used to be, in my generation, if you are rich, you know, people that time 50, 60 years ago never bought insurance. Most of you buy car insurance, right? So those days were you are rich and only rich people can have car. So if you're going to kill somebody, very high probability, right? It will be he or she will be poor. Then you just pay the money and walk away, right? So that was your way to mitigate the risk. But if you think, you say how wrong that is that just because you're rich, you have no right to kill other people. Right? So then the idea is that if you understand hazards and then you control them, you'll be able to control the accidents. And safety has to be designed in, just like reliability, maintainability, resilience, robustness. Safety just always doesn't happen by itself. It has to be designed in. So you could say what is safe, and then how do we manage the risk and risk management, and what is an acceptable risk when you drive or when you use any product. So we can then develop mathematical models for that purpose. So here is a simple idea. Why do mishap is same as the word accident, right? Sometimes we say something has happened that we don't like. It is undesired event. So you could use the word accident. So he says if you take the systems approach as an engineer, cause and effect. So there is a system, there is a state before, then there is a state after. So in the system, there are hazards. Then these hazards will transition to accidents. These hazards will transition to accidents. So it's like I eat, say, bad food, right? 10 years from today, I'll have heart attack, right? And today we have enough knowledge to say how bad habits in eating, not exercising, how it can transition to heart attack and can transition to death, right? If you die, it is not natural. It's not act of God, but it is act of you all the things that you did, right? If you're, especially when we're talking about premature death. We are all designed to live only a certain number of years. So there's a natural degradation and we are supposed to die. But if the design in life is 100 years or 90 years or 70 years, but somebody dies 40 years, that is not acceptable. So it says that hazards result in mishap. So there is a causation, cause and effect. It says hazard is a condition that causes a possible future events. And hazards and mishaps are two different states. They made the transition from hazard to accident, and there was a transition between hazard and the mishap. You can look at the word hazard in a dictionary. You can look at it, just like I think yesterday your vice chancellor said, I can look at quality in a dictionary. Then he said, oh, there is a ISO standard, 9000, I can look at what quality in a standard. Or you could say, what is the intent of anything when you use words? What is the intent of doing that? So it says hazard is an existing potential condition. There are millions of hazards. Not all the hazards will result in accident, right? But there is a causation. And because there are millions of them, many people don't worry about them. They said, just like, we talked about a drop in a bucket. So there are a lot of bad things everywhere. So somebody says, don't worry, but you don't know which bad thing will result in an accident. Which bad thing, which bump in the road, which driver who looks at a cell phone, which person who's careless, which person who's upset, they had a fight with their husband or wife, now they cannot drive safely. Their mind is somewhere else. They're distracted and then they'll kill somebody. There are millions of things that can result in accidents. Then so our job is, we know that human beings are not perfect. So one approach of safety is, of course we want to educate you, we want to train you, so that hopefully you'll become smart. But human beings on an evolutionary sense have tremendous weaknesses, right? We have greed. People, you are like we're talking, you are selfish. Then question is, why are you selfish? You can say, oh, it's not my fault. This is how God created me. So the human beings have tremendous weaknesses. So then one thing we do in engineering is we say, we know people are stupid, but how can I design a system so that even if they are stupid, it won't result in accidents? So that is all the newer technology. So we say, you're stupid, you'll crash your car, but maybe internally I could put a safety bag that will prevent your injury. Maybe very soon we have sensors and radar that will make sure that your car will stop automatically and you won't hit something. So that is a recognition, because people are not perfect. So that means you want to minimize the effect of imperfections of people. You want to minimize the effect of the imperfections of people. Most of you know about Buddha. So what did Buddha do? I'm sorry? What is Buddhist thinking? Say it loud. No. What did Buddha do? Maybe you guys, Buddha? So what did, you're a professor, you can say, what did Buddha do?
They meditate on their feet.
But why do we meditate? What did Buddha, why did Buddha left his life of privilege? And I'm sorry?
To solve the puzzle of mind,
No, no. I'm sorry?
if the person celebrate the personal satisfaction without any
No, no. Even in India, people don't know Buddha. That's I'm so amazed.
he went village to educate people,
No.
self-evolution.
So maybe you should read about Buddha and see what he was. One interpretation is, I'm sure there can be many interpretations. So because he was a person of privilege, and he went out and he found that people are suffering in this world, right? There are people who are dying, people who are starving, there is hunger, and on and on, and people who are not healthy, people who are sick. So his main cause was it affected him. And the main idea in Buddhist thinking is why there is suffering. Why human beings suffer, right? All of us suffer. So he was with that puzzle. Why did people suffer? Just like we are teaching here, why there are accidents, right? So you can apply the same idea to Buddhist thinking. He said, why do bad things happen? There's an accident and somebody loses an arm or a leg. Somebody becomes blind. You go to hospital, somebody's careless, they don't do surgery properly, and now your whole life is destroyed. So then Buddha said, why does that happen? So his idea was to think. So he came up with the idea, he says, I have to understand causation for suffering. Why did people suffer? He said there must be a cause, right? So it was his idea in a very simplistic way. There is so much about Buddhism. You can read books and books and books. So then he identified, he said people suffering just like I have greed. But why do I have greed? Why do I want more money? Or why do I desire somebody? So he said this is his cause is because I desire or I lust or I want money, I want power. So his idea was, if there is a cause, get rid of the cause. Right? So suffering has a cause, and if the cause of suffering is my mind is racing, just like you're talking about meditation, and I'm jealous of other people, I hate some people, I want more money, I cheat to get more money. But if I never wanted more money, there's no reason for me to take bribe, right? Your example with driving. So he said, so that meant is that if you get rid of the cause, you have to become a monk, right? You go and meditate, and you don't marry, you don't need money. So that was his interpretation. But most of us cannot become monks, right? If everybody became a monk, we go to Himalayas and sit and chant, then society won't function. Nobody will even marry, nobody will reproduce, at least in a sexual way. So society cannot grow. So other idea is that rather than getting rid of the cause, you make a system robust against the cause. So even if I have greed, even if I have jealousy, even if my tendency is to do something bad, I design a system so that my weakness is not translated to bad things. So even if there are hazards of living, we have evolved to be very myopic, right? You know that in an evolution sense, just like animals, human beings are like animals. So we are very myopic, short-term thinking. I don't think what will happen to somebody else 10 years from today, but I'm very selfish in my thinking. So how to make systems robust? But Buddha could not make that translation. So then to deal with suffering, like you are saying, so then he said, oh, your mind is going in all directions. So I could find a way to mitigate that problem. So one way is to meditate. So meditation, like you're chanting, meant is I'm not thinking about, making money or harming somebody or killing somebody or worried about greed or worried about my departmental politics. So I'm thinking of something else. So you can focus on breathing. Breathing is basic life, right? If you don't breathe, you're dead anyway. So you focus on very primitive functions of life. And now you're not focusing on a lot of bad things. So that was his thinking. But that means slowly we have to evolve so that a lot of causation isn't there. And that may take millions of years for human beings to change so that we don't function the way most of us function in this world. So it's very similar ideas. You can figure out to Buddha, there are so many hazards of living, right? If you want a girlfriend, if you want a wife, you have to do a lot of things. So Buddha says, okay, don't want a wife. I don't want a wife. I don't want another woman. I don't want money. I don't want a house. I don't want to be king, right? So you can try to eliminate these hazards. But that may be good for one person, but it is not good for 7 billion people, right? So then the question is, there is something in between. We have to learn how to function, but how to function even though we are weak, and how to function on a day-to-day basis. So we can identify hazards are unique. It says hazard exists or it doesn't exist. Either there is a weakness or there is not weakness. And mishap has a probability based on a causal relationship, right? So if you are weak and you say, it's so important for me to talk to my mom on a cell phone while I'm driving, one of these days you will kill somebody or hurt somebody, or you will damage somebody's car, or you will scare somebody, and maybe accident didn't happen, but you scared somebody. So there are three things in transformation. One is the hazard, other is a triggering mechanism, and other is the target, threat, death, injury that will happen to somebody else. So you could do an hazard description, you can look in a standard, or we could say before state is that there is a hazard source, then there is a mechanism, and this can be hardware, software, human error, environmental procedures, and so on, that will result in accidents and mishaps. So that's the idea. When you say it is human error, you think, can human error be avoided? No? Of course, right? Why there is an error? Under what condition you make wrong decisions? Pressure, very good, yeah. Fatigue, you're tired. If you're drunk, you'll make many wrong decisions. If you're drunk and you kill another person, that is not human error, right? You could say it is human error. This human person made a mistake and didn't stop the car in time, working condition, and on and on. So the idea is you can become very fatalistic. You know the word fatalistic? That means you just think these things will happen and there's nothing much I can do about them. These are all acts of God and man has nothing to do with them. But just like Buddha, never talked about God per se. Not in India, but like in some other countries, they elevate him to like a God. But Buddha is not worried about, there's no notion of God in Buddhist thinking per se. So his idea was very, very simple: how to live without suffering, without suffering. And then only way you can do that, his meditation was able to reveal to him that you have to focus on the causation for suffering. Because you have, if that's like if, have you ever listened to Dalai Lama? Most of you know. He lives in India and he has so much wisdom, but it's a very different wisdom. Dalai Lama is very open to changing Buddhist thinking. He invites scientists, biologists, physicists, and then he's willing, he says, you teach me something and there is enough evidence, I'm willing to change my tradition. I'm not stuck with my tradition, which can be very different than many other religions. Many other religions get stuck with it. And then if you say, I could change it, they will kill you. They say, who are you to tell me I should change it, right? But in that sense, Buddhist thinking is very, very different. Anytime you have a group, organized religion, of course it has problems, right? We all know that. Anytime you create a system, it has problems. Anytime you create society, it has very different level of problems. But basically the premise was, focus on suffering. And then Buddhists become very, very smart. They can identify different kinds of suffering and different kinds of human weaknesses, and then how to mitigate those levels of suffering. So here, like a couple of examples, like in military, it says somebody has an ordinance, and then it says, how could somebody die? So it says, somebody can send a signal inadvertent, so I tell the military or one person to go and shoot, but that message was wrong, or I gave a message at the wrong time and the person went ahead and shot and somebody died, right? So it's like you have a high pressure tank and then it could explode and result in death. But then if the tank wasn't designed properly, and if it corrodes and it will rupture, of course it will explode and then somebody will die. If you look in India, every day, how many accidents are there, right? On bridges, on trains, of course on cars, like we talked a lot about cars, in houses, in factories, everywhere. How many in hospitals? Somebody gives the wrong medication to somebody, right? Some people say even in America, more people die in hospitals because of misdiagnosis or wrong medications than because of the disease or the sickness. So that means then how you can develop systems and procedures and checklists so that you can prevent these things from happening. So like anywhere, anytime in any system there is a fuel, there can be a fire, right? But fire doesn't happen just because there is a fuel. There has to be a trigger for that. So the fuel has to leak and then ignition source has to be there. Even if fuel leaks, but there is no way to light it, if their ignition won't happen. So this transformation is always there. So like here I have all kinds of initiating events, and then they will transform, and then they'll become threats or accidents or mishaps to somebody else. So like in say Indian Defense Department, somebody says, there was an inadvertent missile launch happens, and then this results in death or injury. And then this missile has a warhead, and then it could be all kinds of mechanism. There could be electrical, mechanical, software error or fault, and then ultimately it will result in a death. Like even in your own home, you have a toaster, right? You have, toaster, right? And then if it gets overheated, it could start fire, right? So if I was a good engineer, I will design a controller, right? The controller can sense the temperature. As soon as temperature exceeds, it will shut itself off to prevent it from happening. But supposing the thermal shut off, anytime I have a controller, then controller had its own reliability. So controllers are not perfect, right? So one of these days, maybe the controller doesn't work, then it keeps on heating, and then get very hot and will start the fire. Later on, we'll talk about if you say one controller isn't perfect, then as soon as one controller is not sensing, you could have a secondary controller, then you could have a tertiary controller. So that is the idea of if the building blocks of a system are not very reliable, then with redundancy, we can make whole system relatively very, very reliable. So then we'll show you simple mathematical calculation that we can almost design things that are close to perfection by learning about principles of reliability. So we could then debate why do hazards exist. So you could debate why do people have greed. You want to talk about why do we have greed and lust and desires? Anybody?
Internal tendencies.
Huh?
Some kind of internal tendencies we have. In our mind. To get power.
Why do you want power? Why do I want power or you want power?
To satisfy our ego.
This is, why do we have ego?
Ego. We have to search.
We have to search. But why you think? You think ego is we inherited it? We inherited the.
It is in our software.
It's in our software and hardware. Our mind. Yeah. So that's one way to think about that. So we evolved that way. And then the question is, ego will always remain million years from today unless we change the evolution. And as human beings, by changing our culture and our systems and procedure, we can undo these things. Right? It is not that million years. You think just like a million years ago, of course human beings were, at least based on our scientific thinking, not based on religion or faith, human beings were not there. So maybe you could say, oh, we are there 100,000 years back in Africa, and then we slowly evolved to maybe the present state we are in. But million years from today will be very different. But we will only be better if we do something different today to change our evolutionary behavior. So you think, and I think we talked about yesterday, and with evolution we can change our evolutionary behavior, right? Yes, no? You think we can evolve out of greed? No, you're so pessimistic. Huh?
Put apart families, we can get out of greed.
Families? No. What families have to do with greed? Yeah. So I think you're right, but the idea is you have to be optimistic, and you can change evolutionary processes. Just like I was telling them yesterday that I went to America, say 52 years ago. Before that, I could drink any water. I could drink junk, dirty water. I don't get sick. Today, I've evolved where I become sick right away. So I lost that immunity, right? So there was some transformation has happened which had made my system weak in terms of being exposed to these things. It's like, I think a couple years back when I was a young child, we are poor. So every year I have malaria. So then 6 years ago I went somewhere like in Thailand, and I came back, I had a little bit fever. So the doctor said, oh, maybe you got malaria, right? People don't know. So they do blood test. So they say, oh, you are a little bit immune to mosquito bites and malaria. I got so much malaria and became so sick, so my body become more robust, right? So idea is that we can evolve. All the tendencies that we have today, we can change them. But we can change them only if we understand them and if we recognize them, and only if we have the culture to change them, desire to change them. And change is not, in one generation. Maybe I've changed in my own life, but some changes will take 100 generations. But it is possible to change, right? So maybe human beings 100,000 years did a lot of bad things, right? Yes, no? Yeah, so people never understood it. So men will go and attack somebody else, and they rape the woman and on and on. They never understood what they are doing. But today we have become smart enough to understand that it is not a good thing to do that. And at least people still rape. That doesn't mean assault on women is not happening in every society. But there are better understanding of that. There are better controls on that. And so on. There's better training and education on that. So let's continue, and maybe then you can do, you can see in engineering we make a process flow diagram. We understand the causation step by step by step. What is our target? 1:30? Oh, okay, we have 10 more. We could do 10 more minutes? Yeah. So you can see, we can look at the definition of mishap. Then we can quantify priorities. So we could look at different mishaps, and then people say we can rank them. How likelihood something to happen. So if you say, I'm just posing as a theoretical thing, some of you are relatively young. Most of you are like between 20 to 30, as the most of the students, maybe some professor, maybe a little older. So what you think is the highest event that can result in death for you? Where is the greatest risk in your life today? Is it because you'll get sick? Is it because you'll die on a highway? Is it because somebody will come and kill you? Is it because of, which is the highest frequency event for death, say between the age of 20 to 25 or 20 to 30? So you can quantify that, and then you could say how to prevent that, or how to reduce the likelihood that that thing will happen. So we can then do all kinds of priority analysis for this system, and then we could say something is very catastrophic or something is negligible, and this way we can do priority in our life. And then we could say if something bad happens, what is the severity, and then other metric is what is the likelihood. Something has a very high likelihood, but the consequences are very small. Yes, that doesn't matter. But if something has a very low likelihood, but the consequences are death, then you say that's very, very critical. So we can develop all the priorities. So any organization, if you have a safety program, then you have enough safety data to figure out which are the top events, where in our company we should be focusing on. But if you don't understand that, then somebody says, let us improve safety in India, but nobody knows what we should do. Then politicians can make any statement, and they can get away with it because nobody can make a counter argument. So that's the benefit of decision making based on numbers, right? So somebody says, oh, Modi had a big impact, but the question is how our mean is different today than median compared to 4 years ago, right? If that thing hasn't changed, then Modi can make any statement and get away with it. And poor people don't understand it, rich people don't understand it. Then all these statements are very, very emotional. And you can get away with it. Make sense? Because the metrics are not there. So the politician will say how much good they have done to society, but nobody can quantify it. It's metrics that are very well understood, metrics that you are collecting systematically data, means scientifically, not phony data, like we talked about how people make up data and hide things. Then of course you cannot improve quality or safety in the organization. So we have like a couple of examples of as an engineer, how will I improve safety? So like you have in Delhi, what metro, right? What they call it? Yeah. So you have trains. So then people who design trains in China or Japan or Germany. So then the question is, how do you come up with the design of the train so that the trains won't kill people or many accidents won't happen? So then you can identify a system hazards. So for example, somebody says requirement is that if the train starts when the door is open, that is a tremendous hazard, right? Because if train is going at 80 kilometers an hour, door is open, there are so many people in India, somebody will fall out. So then it is a design requirement. It says this hazard must be prevented in the train. So then we'll have a design requirement. So then it will say we have so many sensors, and then if any door is open, the train may have 50 doors. If any door is open, train cannot move. Train will refuse to move because this is a hazard. Or the door opens when the train is in motion, that is a hazard. It says door has to be, we have to design it and develop an interlocking system so that the train door cannot open if train is moving, So you can see, you can identify hundreds of conditions that can result in accidents. And then your job is as a designer to prevent it from happening. So doing all of these things is an engineering problem. Right? So as an engineer, I have to anticipate all kinds of stupid things that people do. And then not worry that people are stupid, but design a system so that the effect of people's stupidity will have small effect, right? So you could say, oh, our driver can do a lot of bad things. So how I can design mechanism so that even if driver makes an error, the system is robust enough, it can mitigate that error in the design of the system. So like you could say, this is always a contradiction. One hand, you don't want doors to open if a train is moving. Other hand, if it is emergency, maybe you want doors to open, right? So that people can get out. So it says we want to make sure that doors are not so locked that they can never open under abnormal conditions. So same thing like when we design airplanes, is that basically the same idea. So when we do basic hazard analysis, we can identify millions and millions of events, causes, and then our job as an engineer is to design it so that we can prevent these causes from transforming to an accident. And then you can, there are many techniques how to do that. We don't have time to do that. How you do preliminary hazard analysis and how you change an hazard to a design criterion or to a design requirement. And then design requirement becomes a problem for the designers to come up with technology so that they can meet the designer a requirement. So all the hazards that we identified, now we have design requirement. Similarly, like in an airplane, we have all the design requirements. And then you will not buy airplane from Boeing or Airbus unless you have met these design requirements. And then you can do it at system level, at subsystem level, at component level. So we can do these things at all kinds of levels. There's another concept that we emphasize, what is called as fail-safe. We know things are going to fail, but we don't want to have things failing and then killing people. So even if things fail, they fail in a safe way. So how to make sure, how to design things when something, even when it fails, it says it fails in such a way that it will cause no harm or minimum harm to other subsystems or to people. We know failures will always happen, right? So same idea is human beings will fail, but you want to make sure that they'll fail in a safe way, right? And you can apply that idea in designing social and political system. So like we talked yesterday in the United States, that our notion of checks and balances, that we have equal power to judicial system, legislative system, and executive system. So even somebody says that Trump fails, people say, no worry, we can fix that problem. There's very little damage that Trump can do. That's why in the United States, every 4 years, we can change a leader, and the day we change a leader, people don't even blink their eyes. Nothing dramatic is going to happen just because you change the leader. System is so robust, one person cannot do much damage in this system. You could say that has its own negative consequences because you can't change things, right? So all the complaints that Trump will have will be, Congress won't let me do these things, and Supreme Court won't let me do things. So it is designed in the system. But if you go to Pakistan or Iraq or Iran, all the countries in Africa, even this simple idea, they don't understand it. You say, how come you cannot implement checks and balances? Don't give power to one person, right? That makes sense. Because if one person is weak, that person can do tremendous damage to society. So that shows that you have to teach a lot of people in this world. So there are many ideas of, in military at least, in interlock and latent failures. So then there are a lot of issues of what is this word risk. Everywhere we go, we take a risk, right? So when we're going to eat lunch very soon, right, there is a risk. Risk of eating food. No, there's tremendous risk. If I overeat, then what will happen tonight? I'll feel sick and won't be able to sleep. Then 10 years from today, I'll probably get a heart attack, right? Maybe food is contaminated. Is food could be contaminated? Yes, no. It could, right? Maybe you guys are very smart and you're protecting us, but there's always a likelihood food can be contaminated, water can be contaminated, the way it is prepared, it is contaminated, right? So maybe suddenly something bad happens, how it was stored, when it came from, where it was cooked, and when you bring it here. So there are a lot of hazards, and then of course there is a risk. But all of us are willing to accept that risk. That's the bottom line. So in society, the very fact you live, there is a risk you will die, right? So you learn to accept that. So we then talk about all kinds of risks, total risk, risk that you can identify. So if I eat lunch here, what risk can I identify? Then there are a whole bunch of risks that I'm not smart enough to identify. And then there are a whole bunch of risks that I know it is unacceptable. If I say, hey, this is too unacceptable, I won't eat, right? So my wife will probably avoid all kinds of food. She says, oh, it's too spicy, I'll go back to my room and I'll be burning, and she won't eat. So then the question is, how much risk you are willing to accept. So we say these are like premises. Risk is a fundamental reality. We always take risk. Risk management is a process of trade-offs. And just because you can quantify risk does not mean you can ensure safety. Just because I can measure things doesn't mean I can improve them. So we can talk about that philosophy again. Improvement means that you have to fundamentally change something. Change the system, change the design, change the processes. And risk always is a matter of perspective. My risk tolerance is very different than your risk tolerance. And all of you who are sitting here, everybody will have very different risk tolerance. Some of you will do things that I think are very stupid, but you're very happy doing them, right? Or you don't even understand what you're doing, right? Many people don't understand. Like when you drive a car with a cell phone on, many people don't even understand what damage they are doing to society. How you manage risk. So there are all kinds of philosophies, and what is an acceptable risk, what is a residual risk, and how we quantify risk. So in any society, like if you have nuclear power, there is a risk. Yes, no. Right. So then different societies have to decide, should you have nuclear power in India? Some societies are saying, no, we don't want nuclear power. Like Germany doesn't want nuclear power. Some countries have nuclear power, right? In USA, 30, 40 years ago, we had a lot more nuclear power. Then for 10, 20 years, we stopped them. We said, no, society says risk is too high. We're not willing to take them. Then after, in Japan, nuclear disaster, now people became very cautious. So every society said, let us stop the development of nuclear power temporarily until we can understand what is happening and what are the consequences of nuclear power. So you can do probabilistic risk analysis. So I can kind of show you pictures, and then you can study them yourself. So if you're interested in software with this hardware, a lot of things that we do for hardware, we can do for a software. So like, then there is something in between software and hardware. Sometimes people use the word firmware and so on. Like we had bathtub for hardware, but there is no bathtub for software. Why you say is that? Remember, in a hardware, there is a natural degradation. Like I have this pointer battery, it degrades with time. This corrosion, mechanical fatigue, oxidation, wear. Software, there is just mathematical equations that you have coded. Equations don't degrade. If there are flaws in the design, they will show up. But equations are not going to degrade. So that shows you how important design is. Once you have a flaw in the code, it will show up sometime in the future. So all the reliability, safety, everything is a perspective, is a function of design. And there's nothing you can do unless you change the software. Otherwise, the problems will always remain. So like we have been teaching in this class, if the system has weaknesses, if designs have weaknesses, they will show up. So that's why systems thinking is very, very important. You could do software safety, because if software fails, whole plane can crash, yes? Because based on the software is a way to communicate. One controller has to communicate with another controller, then to decide what to do. So the whole airplane can crash. And thank you for listening. If I went over, that's okay. So thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you for listening. And then I think we'll have more today. No, we'll have tomorrow morning. So tomorrow morning, what time? 9 o'clock. Okay. So we'll have 9 o'clock Indian time or 9 o'clock American time. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.